All right, some final thoughts on the 177 homebrew 4700 psi PCP that's supersonic. Well, I didn't enjoy the build whatsoever. I don't like the fact that it came out looking like a blunderbuss. I pictured something much shorter, maybe like ending here with more of the barrel and, air storage perhaps in the block. The trigger I made from scratch, that's always a nightmare. One of the hardest things to design is trigger mechanisms. But there's a lot of, for certain people, I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but there's a lot of money in trigger design as well. If you look at the new, FRT and all these other triggers that are happening in the AR-15 world, those guys are making a fortune when they release those triggers, regardless of whether or not the ATF, changes the law or whatever after the fact. So trigger design and that space for engineering are extremely lucrative. But the reason it's lucrative is because trigger design just isn't fun. It's complicated. It's hard to get right. You need to be extremely familiar with all the math involved and everything. But yeah, I had wished this was shorter up front, and that the trigger and grip frame and everything had ended up like about here, like 2 inches forward, because as of right now, this is not practical as a trigger. All your weight, like for example, this main tube, it's 1/8 inch wall steel tube. So it weighs a ton. And the back is a hollowed out aluminum block and a 3D printed grip. So all the weight is up front. And it almost makes it impossible to shoot as a pistol. And initially, when I started out, I figured, well, as far as the flow, I thought, well, I could use a really small poppet and a really small stem, and I can reduce the effective hammer force required, and then therefore I can use a conventional valve for this thing. Another thing, not to just side note, I wish I had made a trigger guard off of this bracket. I could have printed it all at once. But anyway, so I thought I could get enough flow through a small transfer port, small poppet, small throat diameter, so long as the pressure was high enough. So I decided I'll build a conventional valve as opposed to, a balanced valve or a spool valve would have been the easiest, just pump and dump, one shot. The spool moves back, exposes the barrel, and all the air in the plenum escapes at once. And that would have achieved the goal of 1,000 plus FPS pretty quickly. It would have been a pretty simple build. It would have only been one shot, but then now looking back, even with this big air tube and everything else, this is only about a 2 or 3 shot, because it's just putting out so much volume to get that 177, 8 grain pellet, supersonic. The one thing, so yeah, if I hadn't gone that direction, let's say I had gone a balanced valve, for example, if I hadn't gone spool and I hadn't gone a conventional hammer valve where, I'm loading up 30 pounds of force to crack that valve open at 4,700 psi, if I had gone that direction, I could have had far less mechanical material in the back of the block, which also means the barrel and the air tube, everything could have shifted rearward. So the overall length, would have been a shorter gun overall. Right now, I don't know what it is, but it's probably 16 or 18 inches long. So if I had gone balanced valve, I would need less hammer spring, less stroke of the hammer and hammer spring. So that whole firing contraption area with the trigger, hammer spring, and so on could have stopped right about here. It could have been almost, tiny, and then there would have been less distance out front. And part of that is, this isn't all barrel, this brass. This was an extension that was sleeved onto the barrel. The barrel stops at about here. But the problem was with my little bolt-on chronograph, I didn't have anything to grab onto because the air tube. So I had to put something out, further than the air tube to mount the chronograph and, post some results. So yeah, I could probably go back in and build another one of these that meets all the criteria, and it probably wouldn't take long. With either a balance valve or a spool valve, and but you don't learn anything if you're not building anything. Like if I hadn't built this, I wouldn't realize all these things. Like when I started out, I'd never built a high-speed 177 PCP in my life, and I've built a lot of pellet guns, but that just wasn't one of them, which is partially why it was interesting to do this. What else was I going to touch on? Oh, the other thing that dawned on me after this was all done and I broke the sound barrier, is that I had initially planned there's a magazine. I bought the magazine, and this is slotted for that specific magazine. But the shot count wasn't even sufficient to warrant the magazine because I was dumping the chamber way quicker than I thought. I think I get about 3 effective shots, out of this, and the third shot's only like 700 FPS. The second shot, I want to say it's in the 800s or 900s. But yeah, having an 8-shot or 10-shot, whatever it was, 9-shot magazine, it didn't make any sense. So the other thought was, since this has such enormous power in 177, I mean, I think it's pushing 20 foot-pounds or 21 foot-pounds in 177, supersonic, which is impractical. But if I just swap the barrel out to a 25 caliber, this thing would be super practical. Well, we'll swap the barrel out and add like some kind of stock, to stabilize the weight. But it would be still pretty short and compact for like a 25 backpack type gun. And just rough numbers off my head, if it was 25 caliber, it would probably push 45 foot-pounds or so. So I mean, it would be sufficient for small game and all that other stuff. And the gun, even though it's front heavy, it's not necessarily a heavy, probably weighs about the same as a Crossman 2240, because the back end, I mean, this is all 3D printed. These parts are mostly aluminum. This is a hollowed out block, so it never ended up being a heavy pistol. What else? Yeah, I'm gonna come up with another project soon. I don't think I'm gonna do another 177 right away, because I just got through that. And the problem with 177, although nobody talks about it, is fumbling with the pellets. They're tiny, and then the parts you have to make are tiny. And I don't know, there might be people that enjoy making tiny parts, but I generally don't. My eyesight isn't what it was 20 years ago, so I prefer to make medium-sized parts that I can see without reading glasses or whatever. And then you drop the parts, you lose the parts, you try to catch the parts out of the lathe truck. It's just a nightmare. But yeah, that's pretty much my general take on this. Is it outperformed well beyond expectations. When I hit 1,000 FPS, I said this was a complete success. And then I O-ring the barrel, and I started filling a little bit higher. I mean, I had been filling a 4400, but there was something magical in that 46 to 4700 PSI range, where I had the O-rings installed on the barrel and everything was sealing off perfectly, and all the stars aligned. And 2 shots in a row, I got 1181 and 1183. So what's even more important about that, or impressive, is I don't think I've ever seen it done before on the forums or anywhere else with a 7.5-inch barrel or even a 10-inch barrel. I don't think I've seen a supersonic 177, either homebrew and definitely not production. Like I said, that new Huben, I haven't seen the 177 out in the wild, but I'm sure that thing will push 1,000 FPS with regular weight pellets. I'm sure it's designed around pushing 177 slugs close to 1,000. So That should be interesting. I can't find any reviews on it. I find the 25 and the 22, but I don't see anything on the 177, although the website says they exist. So, and as a side note, not that anybody cares probably what my opinion is on, air guns that are commercially sold, but the most impressive, engineering feat out there right now, if you're saying to yourself, well, I'm going to spend a lot of money and just get, one gun that is multifaceted and, has good power for X, Y, and Z. The most impressive from an engineering standpoint, it has to be the Cuban pistol. There's nothing like it. I mean, there's nothing even comparable. If you look at the Evanex pistol, that's pretty impressive as well. And that's, less than half the power, I think, or roughly half the power of the Cuban. I mean, it's unbelievable that you can buy an 80 foot-pound, which is more than my little 25 ACP pocket shooter, an 80 foot-pound 25 caliber pistol that's fairly compact, and now they're making a more compact version, but it's fairly compact, reliable, semi-auto as fast as you can pull the trigger, holds a bunch of rounds. I think it's 17 or 19 or something. It's just unreal. The valve, the valve timing and mechanism and, relative complexity to get that all to, and the magazine indexing and the hammerless feature, to get that all to work in a commercial product. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I guess the same could be said about the Cuban rifle. I mean, it's the same mechanism. I'm not sure if it's shrunk down for the pistol version. I assume it is. But anyway, the next project I was thinking about a 50 caliber rifle. My only trepidation there is, well, where am I going to shoot it? I could shoot it in the shop, but that means I got to build a backstop that's like serious, not just a 2x4. And then taking it outside, I don't think I'd be able to shoot it here in the neighborhood. I'd have to put like an LDC the size of a trash can on there, or I'd have to legit go to the range, which is too much hassle and too time consuming. So yeah, that was my only idea. I had one other idea a couple weeks ago, and that was for a semi-automatic 5/16 steel ball shooter. And I was thinking about making it, it'll be air powered, but having, an electric motor actuate the valve for each shot, and possibly also, feed the mechanism to get the balls into the chamber per each shot. So something along those lines, but it won't be a 177. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.